In a world governed by particle colliders and terabytes of data, it is easy to assume that religion is a leftover psychological crutch, a comforting story for people who don't want to do the math. That assumption relies on a very specific, modern definition of faith. Today, the word usually describes a belief held in spite of a lack of evidence, a blind leap in the dark. But the biblical text operates on a different premise. Wayne Grudem's systematic theology presents a precise counterthesis. Biblical faith is a state of confidence derived directly from a vast, observable set of reliable data. To understand how this works, we have to treat theology with the structural rigor of a physics paper. We need to map the Christian epistemological framework, the mechanics of how we know what we claim to know. We are going to examine three things. First, humanity's internal hardware. Second, the external data continuously broadcasting from the physical universe. And third, the specific cognitive glitch that causes the human mind to ignore reality. Reclassifying faith as a deduction rather than a leap reorders the entire debate. If the evidence is truly objective, the focus shifts from the believer's lack of proof to the skeptic's refusal to acknowledge what is already there. The first stream of evidence comes from Concept 1, the inner sense of God. Grudem argues that humanity possesses a factory default awareness of a creator. He views this sense as a baseline component of human consciousness, rather than a learned behavior. This awareness often triggers during extreme crisis. Grudem recounts a story of an agnostic woman vehemently denying God's existence while riding in a car. Moments later, the car hit a patch of ice and spun out of control. Her immediate instinctual reaction, bypassing her intellectual filters, was to cry out, "Lord Jesus, please help us." That anomaly suggests that a purely atheistic worldview requires active mental maintenance to override baseline human instincts. This leads to Concept 2, willful suppression of truth. Unbelief requires a constant active effort to push away available data. The Apostle Paul frames Gentile unbelievers this way in the text. This excerpt from Romans points out that they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, implying an active and willful rejection of the data they already had. Consider a heavy smoker looking at a lung scan. They have the medical data, but they push it away because accepting that evidence would require a painful change to their lifestyle. If unbelief is an act of the will, then throwing facts at a skeptic is rarely effective on its own. Facts cannot solve an intellectual problem if the root cause is driven by desire. To explain why we reject the data, we must look at Concept 3, sin as an epistemological barrier. In clinical terms, moral corruption acts like a cognitive virus, infecting human logic and leading to inherent irrationality. It functions like a political echo chamber. Deeply held biases force the brain to perform intense logical gymnastics just to justify ignoring the facts in front of it. Concept 4, general revelation, treats the physical world as a continuous, overwhelming broadcast of God's attributes. Grudem highlights this broadcast in his text, arguing that the beauty of a snowflake, the skill of a honeybee, and the abilities of the human hand cannot be the result of accidental assembly. Finding a functioning smartwatch in a forest immediately guarantees it had a designer. Yet, while the human hand is infinitely more complex than a watch, our infected logic often attributes it to blind chance. This creates a stark tension. If the external evidence in nature is clear, the failure to deduce a creator must reside within a broken internal cognitive filter. When Romans 1:20 says God's nature has been clearly perceived, the original Greek describes more than a fleeting glance. It implies that the evidence is comprehensively and continually observed, as if through high-definition lenses. When Romans 1:18 describes people who suppress the truth, the Greek root means applying physical force to hold something down. This mimics holding a highly buoyant beach ball underwater. The truth naturally wants to rise to human consciousness, and keeping it submerged is exhausting. This aligns with the Old Testament. In Psalm 14, when the fool says in his heart, "There is no God," the Hebrew word for fool, nabal, refers to moral perversity and stubborn, aggressive rebellion rather than low intelligence. The biblical text treats a lack of belief as a moral failure rather than an intellectual calculation. It is consistently diagnosed as a rebellion against clear evidence. To counter this irrationality, philosophers built 4 classical arguments. These function as analytical tools designed to organize the vast external data into logical structures. Concept 5 is the cosmological argument. It relies on the fact that every known thing in the universe has a cause. Therefore, the physical universe requires an infinite, uncaused first cause. Concept 6 is the teleological argument. From the Greek word telos, meaning purpose, it observes the fine-tuning of physics and deduces a designer. Concept 7 is the ontological argument, rooted in being. It looks at humanity's ability to conceptualize a perfect entity. If we possess mental concepts of perfect justice and perfect beauty, logic suggests there must be a perfect being existing in reality to anchor them. Finally, Concept 8, the moral argument. Across every culture, there is universal outrage at crimes like child abuse. We inherently recognize this as wrong, regardless of biology or geography. That shared sense of right and wrong points to an objective moral law, which logically demands an objective moral lawgiver. First cause, intelligent design, ultimate being, objective morality. These 4 lines of logic converge into a single conclusion. If the proofs are sound, why do intelligent people reject them? Concept 9 clarifies the distinction between validity and persuasion. A proof is objectively valid if it relies on true facts, even if it fails to persuade a single person. Consider a bribed jury presented with clear video evidence of a crime. If the jury ignores the video and acquits, the evidence remains valid. The jury is simply corrupt. Grudem affirms that the proofs themselves are flawless. He notes that the actual facts referred to in these proofs are true, and in that sense they are valid regardless of how people respond. This introduces Concept 10, divine illumination. Because the human mind acts as a corrupted receiver, intellectual argument alone cannot create saving faith. Consider an encrypted hard drive. The information is physically there, it is objective and real, but the user remains locked out of the contents until God provides the necessary access. Apologetics can organize the data and answer questions, but it cannot repair the broken hardware of the human heart. The traditional proofs for God are not meant to be neutral, academic exercises for philosophers. Because sin causes inherent irrationality, these philosophical arguments act as intellectual interventions. They are designed to cause a mind to think correctly about the evidence it has been suppressing. Engaging with a skeptic is a rescue mission for human rationality, a battle against the willful suppression of reality. If God's existence is self-evident in nature, why do we need complex philosophical arguments to prove it? Is it possible to evaluate evidence for God from a place of true neutrality, or does our moral state dictate the boundaries of our logic? If a valid proof fails to compel someone to believe, is the problem found in the proof or in the person? The universe provides the data, and the human hardware receives the broadcast. But only God can clear the signal. Subscribe for more deep dive theological frameworks. We'll see you in the next one.